So, good morning, everyone. Guten Morgen. Dzień dobry. What else? Dobro jutro. What other languages do we have? Buongiorno. What else? Danish. Oh, yeah. What do you say? Moin? Good morning. Oh, yeah. Also, moin, moin, isn't it? Yeah. Bonjour. Bonjour. Okay. Good. Today I was selecting a verse again from the 11th canto, so probably you were not knowing this in advance enough to do what I was suggesting, that we read the verse and the purport in advance. So that's understandable. But in the regular class system, you will know. I think you were all here. We discussed that priming the pump process. But today I wanted to read a verse from Canto 11, Chapter 3, verse number 32, Liberation from the Illusory Energy. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Shatarine Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Deving Saraswating Vyasa Tato Jayamudirayet Nashta Prayeshvabhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhakti Bhavati Naistiki. So again, we're reading from the 11th canto. This is Chapter 3, Liberation from the Illusory Energy. I just came upon this verse yesterday and thought this is a very nice, inspirational verse. Kvacit rudanty acyuta-cintayā kvacit. Let's try that again. Kvacit rudanty acyuta-cintayā kvacit. There's a lot of alliteration in this. Alliteration is when a sound is repeated. So we get the sound ch 1, 2, 3, 4 times in this line. Dhasanti nandanti vadanti alaukikāḥ. Dhasanti nandanti vadanti alaukikāḥ. And here we also have some alliteration in the sound anti. So dhasanti, nandanti, vadanti, alaukikāḥ. Nṛtyanti, gāyanti, anuśīlayanty, ajaṁ. Nṛtyanti, gāyanti, anuśīlayanty, ajaṁ. bhavanti tūṣṇīṁ param etya nirvṛtāḥ. Bhavanti tūṣṇīṁ param etya nirvṛtāḥ.
kvacit rudanti acyuta-cintayā kvacit rudanti acyuta-cintayā dhasanti nandanti vadanti alaukikāḥ nṛtyanti gāyanti anuśīlayanti ajaṁ bhavanti tūṣṇīṁ param etya nirvṛtāḥ
kvacit rudanti acyuta-cintayā kvacit dhasanti nandanti vadanty alaukikāḥ
Hasanti nandanti vadanti alaukikāḥ.
nṛtyanti gāyanty anuśīlayanty ajaṁ
Nṛtyanti gāyanti anuśīlayanty ajaṁ.
bhavanti tūṣṇīṁ param etya nirvṛtāḥ kvacit rudanti acyuta-cintayā kvacit dhasanti nandanti vadanty alaukikāḥ etyanti gāyanti anuśīlayanty ajaṁ bhavanti tūṣṇīṁ param etya nirvṛtāḥ.
Ladies? Nandanti vadanti alaukikāḥ. Bhavanti tūṣṇīṁ param etya nirvṛtāḥ. Okay, what does all this mean? Yeah, that's what we want to know. Kvacit, sometimes. Rudanti, they cry. Acyuta, of the infallible Supreme Lord. Cintayā, by the thought. Kvacit, sometimes. Hasanti, they laugh. Nandanti, take great pleasure. Vadanti, speak. Alaukikāḥ, acting amazingly. Nṛtyanti, they dance. Gāyanti, sing. Anuśīlayanti, and imitate. Ajaṁ, the unborn. Bhavanti, they become. Tūṣṇīṁ, silent. Param, the Supreme. Etya, obtaining. Nirvṛtāḥ, freed from distress. Translation and purport by the followers of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation: having achieved love of Godhead, the devotees sometimes cry out loud, absorbed in thought of the infallible Lord. Sometimes they laugh, feel great pleasure, speak out loud to the Lord, dance or sing. Such devotees, having transcended material conditioned life, sometimes imitate the unborn Supreme by acting out his pastimes, and sometimes achieving his personal audience. They remain peaceful and silent. Someone was whistling? Oh, yeah, nowadays this is what's going. Oh, Hare Krishna. Okay. I'd like to read the full purport because there's so many nice points in it. The translations and purports were done in particular by the late Gopi Paranadhana Prabhu, a very expert Sanskritist, and His Holiness Hridayananda Goswami. Mainly these two were working together. I believe also some others were involved. This was as requested by Srila Prabhupada, who, as perhaps all of you know, his final translation on the Bhagavatam was the final verse of Canto 10, Chapter 13. And so he gave that commission for them to continue and complete the translation and commenting. And I think you may find it also interesting to know a little detail which I was very happy to hear. It was in the early 80s. I was traveling in South India, and I made a stopover at one of the Gaudiya mats in Rajmundry, the place where where Chaitanya Mahaprabhu met Ramananda Roy. There's a very small Gaudiya mat there, and there were maybe 5 or 7 devotees, brahmacharis, and one sannyasi, one very senior sannyasi who is or was he is no longer in this world, was a godbrother of Srila Prabhupada. And he spoke quite good English, and we had a very nice conversation in which he said many interesting things, but one was, he said, "You," meaning you ISKCON devotees, "you must complete the Bhagavatam translation of your Guru Maharaj." He was very serious and strong on this point. It must be completed because by that time it had not yet been completed. They were working on it. So this was coming from one of Prabhupada's godbrothers, who was also very much his well-wisher and appreciated his preaching. So we have this now. Okay, translation and purport. Having achieved love of Godhead, I already read that. Purport. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has explained the symptoms of love of Godhead. Rudanti, the devotees cry, thinking, quote, "Another day has passed, and still I could not obtain Krishna. Then what will I do? Where will I go? From whom shall I inquire? And who can possibly help me reach Krishna?" That's his example of crying for Krishna. Hasanti. It is late at night. The sky is dark, and Krishna is determined to steal from the house of one of the elderly gopis. He is hiding underneath a tree in the corner of the courtyard belonging to one of the cowherd men. Although Krishna thinks that he is completely concealed, he suddenly hears a voice from one of the elderly members of the family. "Who are you there? Who are you? Who are you, I say?" Thus Krishna has been caught, and he begins to flee the courtyard. When this humorous scene is revealed to the devotee begins to laugh heartily. Nandanti. When Krishna actually reveals his transcendental form to the devotee experiences the highest transcendental bliss. Vadanti. The devotee says to the Lord, "O Krishna, after so many days, I have finally achieved you." When all of the devotee's senses are absorbed in Sri Krishna, the devotee has successfully transcended the material condition of life. When has a devotee successfully transcended the material condition of life?
All his senses are absorbed in Krishna.
2 points for you. That's nice to know, but can we do it? That's the question. This is indicated by the word alaukikāḥ. Alaukikāḥ, or the transcendental platform, is explained by the Lord in Bhagavad Gita 14:26. Mam cha yo vyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samatityayitan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. One who engages in full devotional service, who does not fall down in any circumstance, at once transcends the modes of material nature and thus comes to the level of Brahman. According to Srila Sridhar Swami, ajaṁ harim anuśīlayanty ta līlam abhinayanti. Anuśīlayanty indicates that out of extreme ecstasy, the devotees sometimes imitate or act out the pastimes of the Supreme Lord. This ecstatic symptom was manifested by the gopis in Vrindavan during Krishna's absence. In the 21st verse of this chapter, it was stated, "The one who has understood that there is no happiness either on earth or in material heaven must surrender at the lotus feet of a bona fide spiritual master. Tasmat gurum prapadyeta jignasu shreya uttamam." The following verses gave many detailed instructions regarding the activities of a bona fide disciple. Now, this verse is describing the mature fruit of devotional service, namely pure love of Godhead. Everyone has the opportunity to come to this platform of transcendental bliss by taking the dust of the lotus feet of Krishna's representative on his head. So, who has opportunity to come to this platform? Everyone. And how can they get to this platform? Not someone else. Yes. taking dust from the lotus feet of Krishna's representative and doing what with it? Yes, putting it on the head. One should give up the mentality of envy and false prestige and humbly take shelter of the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The spiritual master is to be considered the incarnation of the Lord's mercy. There is absolutely no doubt that a sincere soul who serves a bona fide spiritual master will achieve the highest perfection of life, Shreya Uttamam. He will enjoy eternal bliss and knowledge in the personal abode of the Lord. That's encouraging. Shall I read that last two sentences again? There is absolutely no doubt that a sincere soul who serves a bona fide spiritual master will achieve the highest perfection of life, Shreya Uttamam. He will enjoy, I might add, he or she will enjoy eternal bliss and knowledge in the personal abode of the Lord. That's the good news. Kvacit rudanty acyuta-cintayā, kvacit dhasanti nandanti vadanti alaukikāḥ, nṛtyanti gāyanty anuśīlayanty ajaṁ, bhavanti tūṣṇīṁ param etya nirvṛtāḥ. Having achieved love of Godhead, the devotees sometimes cry out loud, absorbed in thought of the infallible Lord. Sometimes they laugh, feel great pleasure, speak out loud to the Lord, dance or sing. Such devotees, having transcended material conditioned life, sometimes imitate the unborn Supreme by acting out his pastimes and sometimes achieving his personal audience. They remain peaceful and silent. Kvacit. Mukam karati vachalam pangum langayate girim yat kripatamaham vande Sri Gurum Dinataranam. As explained in the last paragraph of the purport, this is a kind of culmination of a series of instructions. Here we may want to look at the question which prompts this response from Prabuddha, the sage, one of these nine yogendras, Sri Prabuddha Uvacha. The question that he's asked by the king, in this case Nimi, is Yataitam Aishvarim Mayam Dustaram Akritatmavi Tarantyanja Stuladiyo Maharsha Idam Achyutam. King Nimi said, "O great sage, please explain how even a foolish materialist can easily cross over the illusory energy of the Supreme Lord, which is always insurmountable for those who are not self-controlled." That's our big question, isn't it? This is what we want to know. Especially, we may want to know this, feeling sometimes to identify ourselves as here it's in the translation, foolish materialists. We want to know this, and Prabuddha is giving us an extended answer which includes this important verse, Tasmat Gurum Prapadyeta Jigyasu Shreya Uttamam Shabde Pare Cha Nishnatam Brahman Yupashama Shrayam, which is also mentioned in the purport. It's saying Tasmat, therefore. First of all, he's giving some statements about how horrible material life is, just in case one is not convinced. he's describing the horrors of material life, and then he says, tasmat, therefore, one should take shelter of Guru, the spiritual master. Prapadyeta means it should be done. And then he goes on with details of, okay, now I've taken shelter of a guru, now what? And then the guru is giving so many instructions. In a sense, he's summarizing much of what Srila Rupa Goswami elaborates in his Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. And then I find it interesting that he comes, he arrives at this point of what we might want to call prayojana. As I understood, our theme of this retreat has been Sambandha Avideya Prayojana. These three key principles by which they're in a sense, one way of understanding, they're a lens through which we read or comprehend or interpret or understand Shastra. And it's interesting, it can be an interesting little exercise whenever you read any given verse or series of verses. You can kind of ask, so is this focusing on Sambandha, or is it more focusing on Avideya, or is it more focusing on Prayojana, or is it a combination of all three? And what we may find is that what I appreciate is there's an interlocking character of these. You don't have Sambandha without Avideya, you don't have Avideya without Prayojana, and vice versa. None of it makes sense without the other. It's an interlocking interconnection. And this is a source of inspiration because, as we see here in our verse today, there's wonderful results that can come from the process, which in turn is coming from an understanding of who we are. Jivar Swarupahoy, Krishna Nityadas Tatasta Shakti, Veda Prakash, our essential identity as eternal servants of the Lord. This verse, as I mentioned maybe a couple of days ago, I like to see the resonances in our Shastra, and this verse reminds me of, and it might remind you also, of a very nice verse, also in the 11th canto, also just in the previous chapter. Evamvrata svapriya nama kirtya jatanurago druta chitta uchai hasatyato roditi rauti gāyantyun madhavang nṛtyanti lokabahya. It's a verse which is describing the result, like this verse, similar, the result of chanting the holy name. And it's a verse which is quoted by Ishvarapuri, Srila Ishvarapuri, the guru of none other than Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Let's see if I can find the verse without too much delay. Should be number 40 in chapter 2. It's a verse which is described in the Chaitanya Charitamrita as being, what is it? One of the most essential verses of the entire Bhagavatam. Here it is. Yes. By chanting the holy name of the Supreme Lord, one comes to the stage of love of Godhead. Then the devotee is fixed in his vow as an eternal servant of the Lord. And he gradually becomes very much attached to a particular name and form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As his heart melts with ecstatic love, he laughs very loudly, or cries, or shouts. Sometimes he sings and dances like a madman. for he is indifferent to public opinion. This last point of being indifferent to public opinion can raise all kinds of questions about how we relate, how we act in public, and so on. We may want to go there in our discussion, but later. But for now, it's nice to see. This is describing what's often called the symptoms of love of God. When I hear the word symptom, the English word, I think of symptoms of a disease. You know, Prabhupada very often would speak of the symptoms of ecstatic love and so on. I think this is a special Prabhupada usage because I may be wrong, but it seems to me that this idea of symptom is typically used in relation to medical issues. You have symptoms of a disease. But in any case, that's also relevant here because it's mentioned here that sometimes the devotee dances and sings like a madman. Unmadavat, literally like mad. And this particular phrase reminded me that there's been a study done of this kind of madness. It became a book. It was written by one scholar, June McDaniel, whom I've met, an American scholar. She spent some time in Bengal, specifically interviewing people, but also researching the history and studying the literature from the tradition, the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition, but also other Bengali traditions. And she wrote a book called The Madness of the Saints. The Madness of the Saints. And she's exploring what is going on here. What is this? And a general point that she makes, it's interesting, I find, that there's these expressions of what we like to call ecstasy. Ecstasy is a favorite word amongst devotees, right? An ecstatic kirtan, and so on. There's also a word ecstasy, by the way. But ecstasy, in the classical sense, the word ecstasy is used in relation usually to the shamanic experience of being completely out of the body. That is ecstasy, stasis, standing outside the body. But the ecstasy that we hear about and read about and perhaps sometimes feel some reflections of, or sometimes something more intensely, that is not completely outside the body. That's very much in the body. The ashta sattvika bhavas, these are very much involving the body, transformations of the body. And what is happening is, in effect, the emotions are spilling over. They're overwhelming in some way. And we read descriptions of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu being, completely overwhelmed with ecstasy, not outside his body, that also, but when he's dancing in the Ratayatra, what is happening? His limbs are stretching out, they're extending in, his tears are shooting out, and his bodily hairs are standing on end. All these intense experiences are taking place with the body. And all of this is, in a sense, goes beyond the containers of religion. It takes the person outside the boundaries of what is, so to say, prescribed What is prescribed is, doing certain rituals, acting in certain ways, and doing certain routines, thinking certain ways, and so on. But these kinds of intense emotions, which are invoked and evoked in intense devotion, they push the borders, they push the envelope, they stretch the envelope, we would say in English, of propriety. Actually, the word dharma you can take as meaning propriety or maryada also, and we often hear Lord Rama is sometimes called Maryada Purushottama. He is the Lord of propriety. And in contrast, what is Lord Krishna? He is Leela Purushottama. And Leela Purushottama is that Lord who is evoking these intense emotions that are being described here. In particular, and especially, I'm always finding it wonderful to read here about how the gopis, in their intense feelings of separation from Krishna, imitate him. They imitate Krishna to the extent that sometimes they will say, "I am Krishna." Now, if we say, "I am Krishna," we go, "Uh-oh, we've got a Mayavadi here. Look out." Say again? Sahajiya, yes, or a Sahajiya. But the gopis are saying, "I am Krishna." And they're imitating, but they're imitating one lila after another. Actually, that section of the Bhagavatam, chapter 30 of the 10th canto, is a kind of summary of Krishna's lila, his childhood lila. That intensity of devotion is what the devotees look to and is celebrated in the Bhagavatam. And so the Bhagavatam is saying, Savai pungsang paro dharmo yato bhaktir adhokshade ahaituki apratiyata yayatma suprasidati. It's giving a definition of the supreme dharma, dharma being the place of propriety, of doing things right. And it's saying, actually, it's bhakti. The supreme outer edge of dharma is bhakti. And that outer edge of bhakti is embodied in the activities of the gopis. And what do the gopis do? They drop everything and go to Krishna. And what does Krishna do? He says, "What are you doing here? You should go back home." And of course, as he's saying, "You should go back home," he's simultaneously saying, "Please stay here," as Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains. And so they stay, and the whole drama of the Rasa Lila happens, the disappearing, the finally reappearing of Krishna. And the gopis are, of course, overjoyed in Krishna's company, and at the same time they're kind of poking him and challenging him. What kind of a friend are you, actually? And so there's this interesting there's an interesting mood of their devotion, their feeling for Krishna. And all of this culminates in a most astonishing statement by Krishna when he's talking about friendship, and he's saying, I've disappeared only in order to increase your love. That's his excuse, I feel like. That's his reason for leaving when he comes back. And he says, what does he say? He says, "Na pareham nirvadyasam yujam svasadu kritya vibudayushapiva. Your love for me, I'm sorry, I can't reciprocate. It's more than I'm able to properly reciprocate. Why? Because you've given up everything. Krishna, the Supreme Lord, of course, that's one of his opulences, is renunciation, but he is the Lord, and he is in this awkward position now that he's with his most devotional devotees, and they are kind of confronting him, and he's saying, actually, I'm sorry. I can't reciprocate with you. I can't properly. So you'll have to be satisfied with your own devotion. But it goes beyond that, and this is a point I want to. You may think, where is this Swami taking us? Where is he going with all of this? He's going around in circles. No, I'm coming to a point, which I'm exploring, and so by speaking it, it helps me to think more about it. The late Gaur Govinda Swami often emphasized this point, that the Lord Krishna, being in debt, what does he do? He repays his debt to the gopis. How does he do that? He appears as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and as Mahaprabhu, he becomes sannyasi, he renounces. So as the gopis have renounced, so he renounces. That gesture of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is his gesture of reciprocating and thereby realizing the position, the mood, the dedication, the purity of the devotion of the gopis. Okay. So we have now an issue of debt. And we may want to then look or relook or revisit Mahaprabhu's invitation, which he makes in Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi Lila chapter 7 and 8, saying, I am a gardener and I have so many fruits that I am collecting and I need help to distribute them. And so he's inviting the whole world, please join in this Sankirtan to distribute these fruits of love of God. All right, we're familiar with that. Now, what if we go a step further? And this brings us back to Prabuddha's advice to King Nimi, Tasmat gurung prapadyeta jigyasu shreya uttamam. Therefore, take shelter of Guru. Now, what happens when we take shelter of Guru? We become indebted to the Guru, right? We don't usually advertise this point when we're preaching. Take up Krishna consciousness and become indebted for life. Everyone is already enough indebted to the bank, paying for their house, but we're saying, yes, become indebted for life, not just life after life. And then, what does the Guru say to do to honor that debt? Is we should preach. We should take up Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mission. We should go. We should invite people to do what? To take shelter of Krishna. What does that mean? Take shelter of Guru. What does that mean? That means become indebted. And so what is this Hare Krishna movement all about? It's about expanding the situation of spiritual indebtedness. This is a very dangerous movement. But it's also a very blissful movement. because being situated in this sort of indebtedness, it becomes possible. It becomes possible, as is described here, to sometimes to cry for Krishna, sometimes to laugh at Krishna, sometimes to laugh with Krishna, and in this way to experience this condition of being unconditioned, nirvṛtāḥ and alaukikāḥ. This is expressed also by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, his longing, kabe habe bolo seydin amar. You know this song. He says, aparada gucci. He starts throwing away, giving up, distancing myself from aparada. Shudha name ruchi kripa bole habe hridaye sanchar. When will that day come when the ruchi of the name will become spread hridaye in my heart? When is that ruchi of the holy name going to fill up my heart? And then he goes through echoing verses from the Shikshastakam. Trinadika hin kabe nije mani sahishnuta guna hridayeteyani shakale manada apani amani hoye ashvaribonam rasa sar. Considering myself lower than a blade of grass, bringing the quality of forbearance into my heart, showing respect to all, myself being freed from all false pride, tridadapi sunichena turoriva sahishana amanina manadena kirtaniya sadahari. He's turning this verse into a prayer, personal prayer, and so on. And his final verse is coming back to this situation of indebtedness. Kabe jibe doya hoibe udoy nija sukha buliya sudina hridoya bhakti vinod korya binoy shri agnya tahal koribe prochar. Kabe, when jibe doya, having compassion for jivas, for the living entities, hoibe udoy, when will this arise? When's it going to happen finally? When am I actually going to feel this? Nija sukha buli, with a little apostrophe, means buliya, which means it's gerund, which means having forgotten. So nija sukha, my own happiness, buliya, having forgotten my own, in other words, my own happiness? What is that? Who cares? Sudina hridoya, feeling, the word dina can mean something like wretched, feeling lowly. Sudina, very, just as the lowest of the low. Hridoya, in the heart, feeling this sense of smallness. Bhakti vinod korya binoy. Binoy is something like meekness. Vidya vinaya sampanne brahmane. The brahmanas who are endowed with vidya and vinaya. So korya binoy, having done, binoy, humility, Shri Agya Tahal. Agya here means order. The order of who? Of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, which is Shri Agya. It's a beautiful order. That's one way of taking the word Shri. Of course, Shri can also mean Lakshmi Devi. It can mean glorious, but we can say it's that most honored order the order of the Guru, and the order of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, koribe prochar. Koribe, I will do what? Prachar. I will, we say preach, I will preach. When? Kabe habe bolo sedin amar. When will that day be mine? So when will that day be mine that I will expand the situation of indebtedness? And by doing so, I will be working off, even though it's not possible, I will be working off my debt. You know, there's interest accruing as we're taking the mercy of Guru and Krishna. What's happening? The interest rate is there, and it's going up, and you know, unless we at least pay that interest rate, we can be in big trouble. But it's a nice trouble. This trouble we want. And this trouble can invoke in us or induce in us this kind of longing for this prayojana, perfection. The word prayojana means goal. It can also mean necessity. To feel that Krishna consciousness, to be Krishna conscious, it is my necessity. I must do or die attain it. Kabe habe bolo sedin amar. Grantaraj Srimad-Bhagavatam ki jai. Hare Krishna. Maharaj, comments? Is there a microphone for you? Yeah.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much for this very thought-provoking and well-presented class. No, I don't have any. Yes, of course, I could talk on many of the thoughts that she presented, but they're thought-provoking. But I rather stick to questions. I'm particularly interested. How will a scholar like June, what is her name?
June McDaniel.
June McDaniel.
Yeah.
Going to Bengal and seeing and writing a book, The Madness of the Saints.
Mm-hmm.
I guess it's a field research which she has done. Or
It was a combination. She did ethnography, as it would be called, and also textual research. Both.
Textual research.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
What did she find? I mean, when I approached the sadhus, the sadhu loka, and I have great interest in what they feel and so on. I have seen very exalted states, but I've seen also a lot of psychology, human psychology working, which may push a person over a border that is not spiritual, but just What have you read the book or a summary of the book? What does someone who makes that the subject see? That is, I'm highly interested in that.
Well, it's been quite some time since I read the books, so truth be told, I don't think I can speak very specifically. She was particularly interested in this sort of interplay of psychology and spirit. And as I remember, she simply recognized that there is such an interplay going on, that it has a wide variety of expressions, so to say, and that it is, let's say, a field for serious consideration in the academic world. So that's about as far as you get with that sort of thing, But I have met her, I've spoken with her, and she is a thoughtful person who is very intrigued, let's say. I would say it borders. You meet many of these scholars who do this kind of thing. There's a fascination there which draws them, and for them also kind of stretches the envelope. They are scholars, and they want to keep their feet on the scholarly ground, so to say. But they also, they want to rise up at the same time to a higher level. And so there's some interesting mix there. But I can't say I got to know her in any depth, so I can't really say much more than that. But you meet these sorts of people, scholars who, especially in my field, study of religion, so you meet quite a few of these. They're really like they know there's somewhere in betwixt and between, and they are trying to make some sort of resolution of what seems like two different universes. In her book, she mentioned she has a section on Gaur-Kishore Das Babaji and some more modern sadhus. You had a question from.
You briefly mentioned Gaur Govinda Maharaj's comment on Napare Ham. Can you please elaborate a little bit, like how exactly Krishna returned the favor by becoming Lord, by taking the form of Lord Chaitanya, and learning himself what renunciation is? Just a little more.
Well, okay. I can't say much more. Again, it's been a while since reading, but the memory. But he just he elaborates extensively on this, I would say. He makes this a kind of kingpin, a kind of central point of why the Lord appears as Lord Chaitanya. He is coming as Lord Chaitanya. He's impelled. He feels obliged. He must reciprocate that surrender which the gopis have demonstrated, and this is how he does it. He does it by, as you also mentioned, by himself experiencing. And so he takes to the renounced order, which is, we can say, interesting because he's doing something which is within the boundaries of Dharma. He's taking sannyas order, which is an established order, and he is following the regulations of that order very carefully. So even though he's doing this as a reciprocation with the gopis, as an experience of the surrender of the gopis, he's doing it in a very sort of almost self-conscious way in terms of social context. But then we understand, as we go into those portions of Chaitanya Charitamrita describing Mahaprabhu's prema avesha, his madness, his unmada, and his prema avesha, his possession. He becomes possessed, literally, with prema, and his complete over the utter intensity of those feelings as expressed by Krishnadas Kaviraj, quoting from different works and so on. We get a sense that, okay, now it's really happening. Now Lord Chaitanya is in the Gambhira. He is feeling He's really feeling what the gopis feel as Krishna suddenly disappears from the rasa dance. That would be my my very superficial understanding. Yes, Madaji in the back, Manjula.
You mentioned this discussion where Krishna is saying, I cannot reward you, but then there is a sentence, at least in the Krishna book, there's the sentence, you get the reward by chanting the glories of Krishna. So the reward that the gopis get is that they get to chant the glories of Krishna. So the debt which is there, it's a debt, but it's also, there are so many sweet points in the debt. It's
Yes.
not a negative debt.
Yes.
So I think it's important that you don't feel burdened.
Right. It's not a burdened, it's not a debt of burden. But at the same time, it's a debt, which means there's a sense of obligation. And thank you for making this point. It's very nice. And this has been argued by one, again, scholar, that the very sort of kernel concept in the Vedic Dharma Shastras is the notion of debt. That we are born with debts and that we have to do something about them in order to, ultimately in order to be liberated. But there is an obligation, and obligation, this is very much an idea of Dharma, that with obligation one should do something. So yes, and what we should do, as you're pointing out, is something wonderful and sweet and enjoyable and anandam buddhivardhanam. So that's also there. We're expanding the debt, but how is that happening? Anandam buddhivardhanam. It's an expansion of ananda. Yes, thank you. Maharaj.
Because the discussion is on this one point of Nampara, please allow me to kick a little grain of sand into the ocean of this subject, to contribute a little.
Just so long as it's not a grain of sand in the sweet rice.
No. Let us just go to the situation as revealed in the Bhagavatam. There's Krishna, the son of Nanda Maharaj, who's described to be a Dhira Lalita hero by Rupa Goswami. That means he's absolutely carefree. He walks through the pasture land of Vrindavan and is engaged in lila and play for its own sake. There is no worry at all. Now on the other side we find the gopis. They give up everything to be with Krishna. They give up all social norms. They are cursed by society. It is absolutely impossible in Vedic society for a girl to leave the home to come to a lover. They're risking more than their lives. They're risking everything to be with this carefree Krishna. So Krishna is confronted by them. What kind of lover are you? At the end of the Rasa Lila, the gopis say, we give everything to you, you give nothing to us. What is going on? Do you have maybe a character fault? Or, they confront him. So Krishna takes that to heart. He says, your love for me is so great, and my response is so small in comparison. So then he comes as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and he does exactly, his repayment of debt is like this. He renounces society. He becomes, he's not an ISKCON sannyasi. ISKCON sannyasi means you get Lakshmi, you get the best food, your worry is that you don't eat too much, otherwise you are sick. And he walks through the forest,
Yeah.
no meal, no steady meal. What does he do? He does exactly, he replaced an equal coin. The gopis have surrendered everything for being a karma in their love. One pointed, only one person.
Yeah.
Krishna, 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 Krishna. Now Krishna says, I can't be like this. I have to respond to all devotees who are coming to me in kind. I've said this. My love is so much spread all over. I have to do this. Please understand it, but I can't be so single-minded like you. Now, as Mahaprabhu, there's only one thing. He has given up everything. He's become a karma, a kantika, everything egg, like the gopis. And therefore, and he has, as you pointed out so nicely, he has renounced everything. He has only 2 garments, not like Krishna, or wardrobe, a whole trunk only with flutes. And he is now wandering around forlorn like the gopis, waiting for that love to be reciprocated, which they invest in. And this is, yes, he replaces that by becoming like the debtor, feeling like the debtor, acting like the debtor, and showing here, this is what I do now. And feel the benefit.
Thank you for providing much more than a grain of sand in the ocean. This was...
the mountain.
And this makes me think, as you said, he's wandering looking for Krishna single-mindedly in Vrindavan. He's wandering forest to forest, but then starts the trouble, that in his feelings, what happens? He becomes so overwhelmed, he's diving into the Yamuna, and he's endangering his own life as a result. And that is so distressing to Balabhadra Bhattacharya, his assistant. He's so distressed by that, he's having to drag him out of the Yamuna every day. Becomes a regular daily habit of Lord Chaitanya to dive in the Yamuna and forget that he's underwater. So Balabhadra says, Mahaprabhu, please, let's leave Vrindavan. It's too much here. It's too much. You're always... It's too dangerous for you to be here, because he was in too much ecstasy. So it was a short time only. It was only about 2 months that Mahaprabhu was in Vrindavan. And then, to please his devotee, he said, all right. And he agreed to leave Vrindavan. His whole purpose was to come to Vrindavan. From when he took sannyas, his whole idea was, I'm going to Vrindavan. And then Nityananda and Advaitacharya, they cheated him, and we know the whole story. But he just wanted to go to Vrindavan. Every time he tried, there was some obstacles. Finally, he gets to Vrindavan, and when he gets to Vrindavan, it's too much ecstasy. It's too much intense, so much so that his servant says, we have to leave. It's too much uddipana. And so they leave. And then he spends the rest of his life in Puri, in that feeling of intense viraha. Yeah. Hare Krishna. Yes.
again on this point of indebtedness. Will this ever end? That we are indebted?
Would you want to be at a point where you can say, my dear Guru Maharaj, I have now paid back all my debts to you, and so then what?
Yeah, I understand. I understand the material concept of being indebted, but
Yeah.
I don't understand the spiritual concept.
The spiritual concept is that it's giving us ever more impetus to serve. And that is a sweet impetus that we take as our treasure. It's a debt which is at the same time a treasure. Figure that out. Yeah. Okay. Oh, yes, Ananga Manjari Mataji.
I also come to this point that I also thought in the way like we are in material way, and then we have a quantity which we are thinking about, which we have to live in. But is this in the spiritual dimension? Because many times we are mixing this also. We think we have to do a lot.
Mm.
What is with quality?
Yes, that's a very nice point. I mean, that could go into a whole nother discussion, which I wouldn't want to do just now, but it goes into the question of different meanings to the word value. In Sanskrit, we have the word artha, which can mean value. And there's, basically two kinds of value. There's the value which is measurable, and there's the value which is not measurable. And the sort of debt that we're talking about is the kind of immeasurable, is that of the category of immeasurable value, which is why it can be a treasure. But I think you raise an interesting and important point also, that we may be misunderstanding, we may be putting this sense of debt into this wrong category of measurable values, and think, therefore, I just have to do more, and then at some point it'll all be paid off. Whew, and then I can take rest finally. Then I can have as many gulab jamans as I want. That can be a mistake, which would become prayasa, or over endeavor, and that then is missing the point as well. Good, thank you. Good, I think we can end there. Thank you all so much, and yes, it's been my good fortune to be here these last few days. My original scheduling was to come here at this time, and original scheduling. Some weeks ago I was planning out where will I go, and I was scheduling myself to come here, and then I found out that His Holiness Sachinandan Swami will also be here, and there's going to be a whole thing going on. So I thought, oh, okay, that is for my benefit only. So thank you all very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Grantaraj Srimad-Bhagavatam ki jai.